Ready? Chapter 11 Ambush. Keon was woken up by the sound of laughs. He opened his eyes only to see two naked generals standing in front of him. He sat up with a shocked expression, just to turn around and see the same expression mirrored on the other three sitting beside him. "Well, we thought we would take a morning dip before we continue to the next camp," Joa said with a broad smile on his face. "Indeed an excellent idea." Banke pounded Joa's back in approval before they both ran out into the water. "Well, that's one way to wake up." Keon blinked a few times extra, trying to erase the image of the general's private parts from his mind. "Did my blood do that?" Aino looked horrified. As it was time to leave, everyone gathered together at the camp. Edda stiffened where she stood, and her eyes narrowed. "Are all the officers back?" she asked the other generals. "Yes, all from Ayla's blood army are here," Joa responded. Atle nodded. "They are all here, even Tyr." As he heard his name, Tyr immediately appeared next to them. "Yes, I already picked my raspberries. Want some?" he said as he offered them. "No." Edda drew her bow and fired off 2 arrows at once straight into the forest. She waited a few seconds and then shot a 3rd arrow before she lowered her bow. "Did you see any scouts at the previous camp?" "Yes," Atle answered. "They seem to have caught up with you." She started walking towards where the arrows should have landed. 3 men laid on the ground in front of them. Straight through the heart. Joa looked down on one of them, and the arrow which had pierced the man's chest. "Wait, one of them is still alive. Seems like you missed the heart on this one." Joa took a chokehold on the man and lifted him off the ground. "I didn't miss. We need one alive to get information," Edda answered. Joa wasted no time. "Now where are the rest of you hiding?" He locked eyes with the scout. "Death to the blood mages, death to the blood armies, long live the ruler!" The scout went silent as his limp body fell to the ground. "Brainwashed yellow wolves." Joa looked in disgust at the dead soldier he had just drained. Edda started talking again. "I could only notice 3 of them. I don't know if there were more, but they were here for a reason. A few hours from here, right in the path of the next camp, is the perfect place for an ambush. The enemy might be waiting there for us. I'll show you." She picked up a stick and started drawing on the ground. "There are 2 heights. Between them goes a path. It's by far the fastest way to travel. If not, you're going to have to go through either of the forests that cover a large area. The trees grow all up onto the heights. Those heights, that's where they would be. I don't know what they might drop on us, but they could damage us greatly." Joa took another stick and started drawing on the ground as well. "We could go through the forests. Split up, half of us on the right side and the other half on the left side. They could also be waiting for us there, ready to ambush us as we move. We don't know how many they are." Edda looked at Joa. "They might not know how many we are either. If those were the only scouts, they might not have been able to report how many we are. Those ready to ambush us could think they're only facing the 5 officers at this camp, not all before as well." Joa put down his stick. "It's a gamble, but we don't have much of a choice. We need to move." Edda continued. "So the officers in this camp will move with our creator on the path between the heights. The rest of us will split up as you suggested, Joa." She looked at the other generals. All nodded in approval before she continued. "We will wait for your signal. If we have not gotten any as half of the day has passed, we will move forward anyway. We cannot afford to waste more time than that." All the officers moved together through the forest. The 2 heights Edda had talked about was starting to take form in front of them. Like a U-shape, the forest divided itself, climbing up on the 2 heights. Inside the U-shape lay an open field, before it narrowed off into the pathway they would be taking. As the group split, Keon, Aino and the officers from Edda's camp laid in wait right before the beginning of the field, still shielded by the forest. Juha led the left flank. All of the officers there were from Eila's blood army. Bank and Atle led the right flank, as that consisted of both Eila's and Nila's armies. They moved through the forest, on the lookout for any attackers. Juha signaled a halt. He could hear voices ahead of them. There were many of them at the same place, seemingly on a break, laughing like they had no worries. It was clear that they were not prepared for enemies in the numbers that were about to hit them. The lieutenant general looked around at his officers. No point in trying to sneak up on their enemy. Offense was the signature of mages. He raised his axe. Charge! Leave no survivors! He lowered it and pointed in the direction of the voices as his officers ran past him with their weapons drawn. By the time the enemy had realized what was happening, it was already too late. Juha saw the beautiful spectacle play out in front of him. Blood splattering on the trees, covering the forest floor. The piercing screams of horror and the metallic smell of blood spreading through the air. 100 murdered soldiers within minutes. He licked his lips. This was what he lived for. A severed head flew through the air, landing in front of his feet. He bent down and grabbed it by the hair and looked into the eyes of the now dead man and smiled. Dying with such dread displayed on your face, it's perfection. Juha looked at the dead bodies on the ground. No assassins this time. They were all soldiers from the ruler's army. It seemed like the ruler had stepped up his game. No more bounties on the mages' heads. He was going after them directly with his own people. Make sure no stone is left unturned. We don't want any of them getting away, Juha yelled to his officers. He heard no sound from the right side forest. It seemed like his flank was the first to engage with the enemy. Juha looked up on the height. No one on the other side of it. Seemed like the coast was clear. He stretched up his hand in the air and waved. That's our signal. Edda turned to her officers. We're going to run in a group. Form a ring around our creator. For as long as she is with us, you will stop for nothing until we have reached the camp. Aren't we going to wait for the signal from the right flank as well? A worried officer asked. Edda looked at him with a stern face. Our orders are to take our creator to the generals, not to stop and check if everyone is okay along the way. If any enemies turn up on the other height, Juha will take care of them. Is that clear, Lieutenant? The officer made an audible swallow. Yes, General, he answered, a bit embarrassed. The group started running, and as they passed through the pathway, Aino felt a drop of blood hit her ear. She looked up to see Juha lean over them, up on the height. His cloak was so wet by blood it was dripping down on the path. How many had he killed this time? As the distant screams reached the Banki and Atle, they knew Juha had beat them to it, and they had no choice but to charge as well. They, however, had not been able to locate their enemy yet, and so had to move in blind, hoping they were close enough. The forest was quiet as they moved, too quiet. They were soon aligned with the height, yet they had seen no enemies. A small crackling sound was heard as a branch fell on the ground in front of Banke. He looked up and his eyes widened. There they were, all of them, hiding in the trees with their bows drawn, aimed right at the mages. It was a trap. Shields up! Banke screamed as the opposing soldiers released 100 arrows upon the unprepared officers, who were desperately trying to get their shields up in time. Very few of them succeeded, as the arrows pierced their skin, and their cries of pain was heard far and wide. Juha froze. Those were not the screams of his enemies. Those were the outcries of mages. Those screams, those were... The lieutenant looked back with dread in his eyes. None of your business, Edda answered coldly. But shouldn't we help them, General? I'm a doctor, I might be needed. He looked at Edda. Question my orders again, Ossian, and I will strip you of your rank, Edda said as she clenched her teeth. You can't do that, the lieutenant mumbled quietly in response. Edda looked directly at him. Watch me.